Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. If there are any technical issues happening through the next couple of streams, not that there will be too many. That's because, as you can see, I'm visiting family, so I have done a kind of Frankenstein's monster setup, bringing my laptop, bringing my microphone, not bringing my earpods, unfortunately, but we should still be fine, obviously, with AirPods if we need to react to something from YouTube or somewhere else. Also have my iPad next to me, so hopefully it all works just as you are used to. Hopefully audio and video quality is all right with you. However, of course, please let me know if anything doesn't work. Stuttering, frame drops, bad audio quality, my cat biting my cable. It could all happen. So yeah, this is a very experimental stream. I haven't done one from this apartment in quite a while, so bear with me. I also, of course, apologize for now the pretty long hiatus between this one and the previous video. So I actually missed a bunch of Apple news and rumors, and hopefully in the stream today and maybe one on Thursday, I'll actually be able to summarize everything that I have missed as we, of course, get closer to the reveal eventually of the iPhone 17 series, as we get closer and closer to the official, of course, release dates for iOS 26, macOS 26, and we'll have to see, of course, how Apple keeps evolving the liquid glass user interface design. So there will be plenty for us to talk about. Of course, I know you guys love iPad and Mac talk, and I have something of that today. Jesus, my mom's cat's hair is like literally flying everywhere because she was just cuddling with me and then she quickly jumped off when she heard me start the stream. So if I get allergic throughout the stream, you'll know why. That's because the hair is absolutely unescapable. It's summer, so she's losing a lot of it. Yeah, that's about as much I can control it as I can. Like, just getting rid of the worst sweat and the worst amount of hair surrounding me. I also apologize for the slightly tweak timing of the stream. I know most of you have said you prefer like a 6 or even 7 p.m. for my time, German time, starting point. Well, today we are starting at 4 p.m., which is even earlier than my earliest usual 5 p.m. timing. So yeah, but that's because I can only stream up until about 5:30. So please, again, bear with me. I'll probably have much more free time next week, even though I'm still staying here. But yeah, I'm visiting friends and spending time with family and working out a lot, eating healthy. So yeah, that's why you are not going to be getting your usual amount of like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 weekly streams as you get when I'm streaming from home in Berlin. Yeah, but that's about it for the intro. A little bit of my usual babbling out of the way. I see my stream seems to be working fine here on YouTube. I'm absolutely content with being pretty much alone this stream. The YouTube algorithm hates when I go on like a week-long hiatus. So yeah, I'm not surprised that obviously it might not even send notifications when I do that, from what I've heard from you guys. So if you haven't yet subscribed, if you haven't yet liked, if you haven't yet sent comments, please consider doing that, of course, but also hit the notification bell so that next time at least you will actually be informed when I'm going live. Yeah, but now that we have all the babbling out of the way, there's actually a few major topics that I have missed. I would like to start with, in my opinion, the biggest one, because I think that's the most relevant to us as consumers. That's Apple's roadmap for the better part of 2026. This is coming, of course, from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. And then we'll continue with some company news, like Apple's CEO, Jeff Williams, a long time veteran at the company, is basically preparing to retire. So that brings up questions about who is Tim Cook's number 2. From all intents and purposes, it seems to be John Turnus, the vice president of hardware engineering for the moment. Yeah, but we'll have to see, obviously. There's plenty of me to react to. I don't think I'll get through all of it given my time constraints. So I appreciate each and all of you who find me live, who join afterwards to watch the video as VOD. It all helps the channel. It all helps me keep me engaged. And of course, as always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover, suggestions for other content. I've done some gaming streams in the last few streams. That has been positively received. I think I'll do that as well again in the future, but obviously not today. There's a lot of reading to be done today, and much less YouTube video reacting as we sometimes have in front of us. There is some drama and some ranting that's going to be coming your way this stream, so if you enjoy that, stay engaged. And if you're checking this after the live, I'll try to give you some sensible timestamps about how the video is structured so you can find the topics you are actually interested in. So without further ado, let's actually get started. So this is again from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman from 4 days ago on July 10th. So obviously on July 4th, the United States was celebrating Independence Day. That resulted in a lot of outlets, newspapers, basically taking a long weekend off. And then a week later, people like Mark Gurman are basically back in full force and are posting new information for us to react to. And after me taking some time off, I'm also back. That was basically my Independence Day week rather than weekend. So yeah, I'm back, baby. So let's start. Apple Inc. is planning an ambitious pipeline of new products for release during the first half of 2026, including a new low-end iPhone, multiple iPads, and upgraded Macs. So specifically the Macs is what I'm reacting to. The rest seems to be mostly unchanged from previous Mark Gurman reporting, but also from reporting from other news outlets. Obviously, Min-Chi Kuo has also commented on Apple's roadmaps and stuff like that. Majin Buu, who's becoming a little bit bigger these days, and of course Digital Chat Station, Focus Digital, all those Weibo leakers from China. So it's these days it's really not just a Mark Gurman playground. There are other players joining. The lineup due by spring of next year includes updates to Apple's entry-level tablet and iPad Air, as well as an external Mac monitor, according to people with knowledge of the matter. So that external Mac monitor, that is absolutely fantastic. Hopefully, it's actually properly high-end. Don't forget, the latest MacBooks support Thunderbolt 5, which gives you 120 gigabits per second in one direction, right? Plus 40 gigabits back. So that's a combined 160, which means you could max out like a 6K 120 hertz screen with full bitrate, high dynamic range support, all of that jazz. Plus even have some great bandwidth for extra USB-C accessories and things like that. So if that's what's happening, again, Mark Gurman has been a little bit fluctuating on whether we are talking like a Pro Display XDR2 or a Studio Display 2, but either one could use an upgrade. The Studio Display 2 basically uses like a 5K 27-inch iMac screen that kind of has been with us for a decade at this point. Sure, it has been tuned. It gets a little bit brighter than it used to. It's a little bit more contrasty and all those things. But we do have Mini LED, ProMotion, OLED, Tandem OLED that Apple could utilize. Push all of that through Thunderbolt 5 or at least HDMI 2.1, which Apple won't do, but that would be an option with the later MacBooks as well. So yeah, we are definitely overdue to get a new Mac monitor. Hopefully it doesn't get crazy expensive. I mean, the Pro Display XDR at this point is a joke with its like 576 local dimming zones versus like MacBooks having 2500 on a like 4 times smaller screen, right? So they're definitely can be some improvements. And of course, the fact that no external monitor from Apple is actually promotion, when they're bringing promotion this year even to the base iPhone 17 and iPhone 17 Air. Of course, the MacBook Pros are promotion. Of course, basically any other external screen that's not extremely productivity focused, like maybe an 8K screen, will be most likely 120 hertz. Might not be that it has, not everything out there is like a super fast gaming monitor with like 5 millisecond response times on LCD and sub 1 millisecond response times on OLED. We talked about that stuff when we watched that Nintendo Switch 2 screen video analysis on this channel. But yeah, to me, it's just absolutely necessary that Apple does at least something to give us a new Mac monitor. The budget smartphone, dubbed the iPhone 17e, so seemingly a direct successor to the iPhone 16e, will be a follow-up to the $599 model that Apple launched earlier this year. The company is also working on upgraded MacBook Pros and Airs. Of course, his sources are anonymous. I don't think that needs to be said here. Though those computers were originally slated for a 2025 release, Apple is considering pushing them back to 2026, they said. So basically, if you followed Apple's lineups, well, the Airs, for example, they have been launching early on in the year, but that usually followed an October to November release for the MacBook Pros, which usually also coincide with the launch of the next generation of Apple processors like M3s, M4s, and this gen, it would be the M5. So seemingly Apple seems to want to kind of combine those launches together, maybe free some marketing opportunities to better push the iPhone and the iPad during the Christmas season. That could be a result of the Mac actually performing really well, which we have seen, Nerd World joining the chat saying, "Hey Mark, AMOLED display this year." Well, AMOLED, no, because AMOLED, like the A and M in the beginning of the word, stands for active matrix. So that's about the touchscreen layer being integrated into it. That, for one, that makes no sense for a MacBook that doesn't even have a touchscreen, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. And as for the iPhone and iPad, I think, however Apple is using their different like touch sensitive layers, their stylus digitizer layers, I think we've been pretty fine, right? Apple managed to put out a 5.1 millimeter thick iPad Pro with incredible specs inside without relying on the same AMOLED technology as Samsung does. Though I'm not even sure if by this point Apple hasn't integrated the touch layer themselves in some kind of solution. OLED? Well, yeah, OLED, of course, but we don't know which devices are getting OLED. So the new Macs coming this year or early next year, the MacBook Pros, they're not the redesign model. So previously we talked about in 2026, we're getting a redesigned MacBook Pro, but that was for the end of 2026. That was for an M6 generation redesigned, thinner MacBook Pro, 2 nanometer, potentially integrated Apple 5G in-house design modems, right? A change to the dynamic island or notch on the MacBook screen. So whatever is coming our way here, I wouldn't really bet on it being OLED. Maybe if we're talking about a Pro Display XDR successor, right? When we mentioned, of course, the Mac monitor, that's a different issue. But that will put it so far out of line for the budget of a regular consumer. It's not even funny. If they use the same kind of screen technology, which they kind of would need to replicate the HDR capabilities of the current Pro Display XDR, we are talking about a potentially like $7,000 to $8,000 monitor. And if Apple wants to go crazy and make it reference grade, right, so that it can actually be used in high-end Hollywood production, uh, and like for real, like right before you put it basically on the big screen in the cinema, the last screen you watch it on is like a Pro Display XDR2, which the current Pro Display XDR is not suited for because it doesn't have pixel level local dimming control. So yeah, that is gonna be very, 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 very expensive, unfortunately. So MacBook Pros, MacBook Airs, supposedly MacBook Pros now being pushed from late 2025 to early 2026. That would put them potentially into a launch lineup together with the Airs, but could still technically be separate. He doesn't elaborate on top of that. The new products are part of a push to get to more consistent revenue growth following this fall's iPhone launch. After a pandemic-fueled sales surge in the early part of the decade, Apple has suffered from spottier demand the past 2 years. So this has been reversed. Both Mac and iPad are performing really well, as we've seen. Now, we don't know how sustainable all of that is, but I would argue the slump that he's talking about was potentially to blame on just the extreme demand based on the pandemic, and then the M2 and M3 generation just being not as appealing early on, especially not to upgraders from M1, right? As M1 was versus Intel chips-based Macs. So yeah, I don't think that Apple has anything to worry here. There's also questions about, does Apple maybe not have enough M5 chip supply or whatever? Maybe they want to put more M5 chips in the meantime into their own servers, into Apple's private cloud compute for AI, but it's hard to say. Is there any macOS 26 release date yet? No, but what we've seen in the previous years is that while usually macOS launched like a full month after iOS and iPadOS, that gap has been progressively decreasing in size, right? So I would argue there's a pretty good chance that macOS 26 releases like we'll get later on in the video to like the supposed iPhone 17 launch dates. If the iPhone actually launches like by like it gets shown off by September 9th or 10th, and then it comes out a week later, a week and a half later to be precise. So let's say September 20th to just be generous here. So that could mean a pretty early October launch for macOS Tahoe. A spokesperson for Cupertino, California-based Apple declined to comment. What a surprise, right? The flurry of early 2026 product is poised to follow the company's typical fall upgrade cycle this year. So we're getting iPhone 17s, redesigned Pro models. This is in contrast to what we expect to happen next year, where supposedly we only get iPhone 18 Pros and Airs, well, and Folds, of course, late 2026. But then the base iPhone 18 would come in early 2027. So this splitting of the releases is not yet happening in late 2025. There will be a new entry-level and high-end Apple Watches. So after not upgrading the Apple Watch Ultra 2 last year, Apple will be upgrading it. And we are also getting a Series 11 Apple Watch and a new Apple Watch SE. There's also incoming a new iPad Pro or upgraded iPad Pros and a faster version of the Vision Pro headset. We'll get a little bit later on to how what Mark Gurman is saying here might be clashing a little bit with other rumors that we've heard about the second generation Vision Pro. So the entry-level iPad and iPad Air models, we've actually had a stream where I went through all of these code names internal for the devices. I'm not going to be reading those out. But basically, yeah, they're mostly slot-in replacements for the existing models, most likely just coming with new chips, some other smaller tweaks. So the current low-end iPad, the iPad non-Air, non-Pro, non-Mini is $349. Delivers actually pretty good value now that it's been upgraded to the A16, and and that Apple's new windowing feature coming in iPadOS 26 is actually supported on this processor. It's supported on even more chips, but you will get like more open windows out of it. You will get more performance out of it. You will get more multitasking capabilities out of it than versus like a previous generation A14 iPad. The new iPad Air models will be upgraded from M3 chip to M4, most likely also getting a pretty bint chip, just like they don't have the fully enabled M3 processor. Though they're further ahead in the development process, the devices are on track to launch around the same time as the new low-end models. Again, that makes sense. iPad Airs are pretty popular. There have been times when they've competed with the iPad Pros a lot, but I think that now that the iPad Pros are like $400 more expensive in base, that's just like, yeah, there is a definitive market now for the base iPad, $350, for the iPad Air, $600 and up, and of course for the Pros, $1,000 and up. Plus, of course, the crazy accessory prices that you get the higher up you go. The iPad Air, the company's mid-tier tablet offering, has been a strong seller. The combination of an iPad Pro-sized screen and a relatively affordable $800 price tag, that's for the 13-inch version, has made it a hot seller for consumers, businesses, and schools. I would love to hear some concrete numbers, how well it sells, what percentage of market share it might hold in the overall iPad space. But yeah, at least Mark Gurman seems to know something we don't, which is, or at least we didn't, that the 13-inch iPad Air is a pretty good seller. Then, something that I'm more interested in, the iPad Pro will get an M5 chip, and of course, that's the continuation of the current M4 iPad Pro, which right now starts at $999. It hasn't been updated since May of last year, so it's kind of overdue, like in an 18-month cycle, roughly, to be updated. Obviously, in October, it would be more of 11 months. Or even like, it would more be like 17 months or like 16 and a half. But you still get the gist. The iPhone 17e, that continues a rumor that we've actually reacted to in the last stream, which is it's going to look similar to the 16e model and just have an A19 chip rather than the A18, so that will put it in line with the rest of the iPhone 17 lineup. That to me also pretty much confirms that the base iPhone 17 is getting the A19 chip, not the A18 as has been rumored. So the last stand that I have seen about the current iPhone 17 lineup is basically iPhone 17 A19 chip, 8 gigs of RAM, iPhone 17 Air, A19 chip, 12 gigs of RAM, and iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, A19 Pro chip, and 12 gigabytes of potentially faster memory. So yeah, that will be an interesting dynamic. But that, at least Apple is not cheaping out suddenly, right? I would still fully get it if like a base iPhone 17 came with an A18 chip, but that would put it in a slightly peculiar position, of course, versus the 16e and later on, even worse, the 17e if that one gets the same chip. So yeah, seems all right to me. So the quick transition from 16e to 17e indicates Apple is moving to an annual update cadence for its entry-level iPhone, a shift from its prior strategy. The company's preceding iPhone SE line was only updated twice after debuting in 2016. Yeah, that was definitely more. Partially here is that Apple was using kind of like sloppy seconds components. So basically, once something was not anymore seen as flagship, Apple was able to incorporate that into the SE lineup. That includes like the metal glass sandwich design for the original iPhone SE when the iPhones 6 and 6 Plus and 6S and 6S Plus transitioned to a unibody aluminum chassis. Then later on, of course, once that became not the standard and we got full screen OLED screens on at least on some iPhones. We got a 4.7-inch LCD iPhone. Yeah, and that was basically the modus operandi for the iPhone SE. The iPhone E, as it currently stands, can be a little more ambitious. Though unfortunately, judging from current rumors, there is a chance that the 17E does not just simply look the same as the 16E, but actually gets the same pretty disappointing 800 nits, pretty thick bezel, notched rather than dynamic island OLED screen, right? I mean, still that, of course, that's still way better than what we've seen on the iPhone SE, and very likely by iPhone 18e, we would be looking at a dynamic island screen. But yeah, it's still disappointing to be getting something like that in early 2026, at least in my opinion. The company had been planning to release new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros later this year with M5 processors, but Apple is now internally targeting a launch early next year, meaning that the current MacBook Pro release cycle may last a little longer than usual. I've mentioned an 18-month release cycle for iPad Pros, for example. Maybe Apple feels a little bit more confident in that. Interestingly enough, if they stick to that, that would mean the next MacBooks after this would actually then launch in like October of 2027, right? Or Apple then switches again to just a 12-month cycle, but it's just pushed a little bit. So that would mean that the supposed M6 redesigned and OLED-based MacBook Pro might be coming in early 2027. He does not confirm whether this is fully decided on. He's saying the timing remains fluid. He also doesn't commit to any other changes rather than the M5 processor. So that's still up to Apple. Supposedly the production is far enough along that they could still launch it in either October or November, similar to the M1, the M3, and the M4 generations. So when they do roll out, the M5 MacBook Pro will be the last with the current design, which was introduced in 2021. The follow-up models will include new cases, a move to OLED. That's the same higher contrast technology Apple adopted to iPhone in 2017 and the iPad Pro in 2024. Should be noted that the MacBook Pros are expected to get the tandem OLED, that dual-layer, more efficient OLED technology that the iPad Pro uses, and then eventually we would get MacBook Airs with more traditional, cheaper OLEDs that don't get quite as bright, are not quite as efficient, are a little bit more susceptible to burn-in, though Apple has been pretty good at mitigating OLED risks. So yeah, it will be an interesting dynamic. Also, we of course saw the M4 iPad Pro increase in price based on the introduction of tandem OLED technology. So it will be interesting to see if the M6 MacBook Pros will also come with a similar price increase, maybe from a base 2,000 price to a base 2,200 or something like that. But then again, this is purely speculation on my part. New MacBook Airs are also coming in the first half of next year. New Mac monitor, the new version codenamed J427 is currently slated for early 2026 as well. So unfortunately, he does not give us extra information on whether or not we are talking here Pro Display XDR successor, Studio Display successor. So, but I'm pretty sure that if this actually is a timeline that Apple wants to stick with, that the latest by like October, November of this year, Mark Gurman and potentially people like Ross Young, who of course are even better at display reporting, will come out and confirm what kind of Apple Mac external monitor we're actually talking about. But we do have more stuff from Mark Gurman here, actually. And that, of course, brings us to a pretty big story in the Apple world, which I actually know most of you don't care too much about. This is a very almost drama focused story, even though it kind of shouldn't be. Part of that is also that journalists like Mark Gurman are really deciding to cover it, in my opinion, in the worst way possible. So, as you might have heard, Jeff Williams, Apple's current chief operating officer, right? So COO, not chief executive officer, which is Tim Cook. Who is Tim Cook? Or Tim Apple, if you prefer that. You see, Tim Cook has aged pretty much a lot recently. I guess being very white in very sunny California makes you age faster. Probably somebody should have recommended him some pretty good sunblock, but hey, he's really good at his job. So, but basically, why does that matter to us? Well, if you care about Apple's internal operations, you should know that Jeff Williams is a decades-long veteran. He has also even overseen many of Apple's internal projects. So he's not just a money guy, even in the way that Tim Cook used to be when he was under Steve Jobs. But basically, Jeff Williams was the number 2 at Apple. So if somebody thought, well, if maybe Tim Cook tomorrow slipped on a banana peel and broke his neck, Jeff Williams would basically take over. And now that Jeff Williams is retiring, well, before Tim Cook is doing the same, now that brings up the question, who is the next CEO? Now, we know, of course, who the next COO will be. They already announced that transition. It's basically Khan. I always forget his first name. But the reason why I really wanted to cover the story through the light of Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter is the way he actually chooses to engage with like Tim Cook's, not necessarily legacy, but the current state of Apple affairs. And this to me actually suggests that Mark Gurman is either terminally online and just reacting to the most niche tech Twitter opinions, or he is just riling people up because he knows it will get him more clicks. So what's apparently his belief about Apple's current standing of executives in the situation? There is no question Cook bears responsibility for Apple's current struggles. And by the way, none of Apple's financial reports recently suggest any kind of struggle outside of like external struggles like Trump's tariffs and maybe overall lower demand in China. That's why China announced incentives, by the way, for all companies, not just for Apple. Apple seems to be also doing pretty well with those subsidies, so it's not like they've been left in the cold. But yeah, so what does Mark Gurman believe to be Apple's current struggles? Well, that includes the company's AI missteps. I also still find it funny how the story about Apple's AI misstep, right, which is the overpromising of a new generation of Siri, with the delay that eventually happened, right, and what we now expect Siri to launch in sometime in 2026. And yes, there have been Apple engineers that have been poached by competitors, especially in the AI realm, like Facebook. That is like people are really pretending like this one specific thing, right? Oh, we overpromised a little. We now need to delay a bit. Yada yada, right? Well, like this is now like a Game of Thrones like saga to these people. It's like Apple's AI missteps, right? It's like a decade-long story and not just something they showed off at WWDC 2024, which instead of launching around WWDC 2025, might launch sometime in early 2026. If by this understanding of misstep, like a small delay, like by that logic, like Rockstar is currently being mismanaged, right? Because GTA 6 had to be delayed. And before that, Red Dead Redemption 2 had actually to be delayed multiple times. But yeah, it's just nobody's gonna measure Apple with the same measuring stick as everybody else. Like the expectations to Apple, even though, by the way, Microsoft, Google, they all have outrageous amounts of money, and all of them had failures in the AI early stages. Yeah, apparently Apple is not allowed to have any of that. By the way, guys, if you want to say hi, this is my mom's cat, used to be my cat, little Bella. She's getting a little anxious because she doesn't understand why I'm criminally insane and talking nonstop to the camera. Next, he points to an aging product lineup, which makes no sense. Apple has some of the fastest upgrades to products. I mean, you can argue that like maybe he wants more things in there, like foldables, but that's really not for him to decide. The reason, for example, why people talk about an aging lineup at Tesla, Jesus, Bella, she's you can see she's moving my mic back and forth with her freaking tail. But the reason why you can criticize some companies for an aging product lineup is pretty simple. Don't want her to eat the cables, is because people actually come out and say, oh, I would love to have more offerings, right? I would like to have a significant upgrade or redesign. And some might say, well, isn't that what's happening with Apple? Aren't people saying, oh, I want a foldable? Oh, I want a redesigned iPhone 17? Well, not really. No sales numbers point to that. So this to me seems like a criticism that Mark Gurman read from other analysts about other companies, and he basically decided it sounds good, so let me criticize Apple for the same. Next is then a completely made up point, which again, that's because I've pointed to Mark Gurman being terminally online. He's saying there was an erosion of Apple's design-focused culture, and then a decade-long drought of breakthrough mainstream hardware and its growing tensions with developers and regulators. Now, Apple's tensions with developers are basically happening online. Developers have been happy to oblige with what any store rule they have on PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, and they do even a lot of revenue sharing with Steam and with Valve through Steam, rather than like everyone just going through GOG and not having to face that, because that's the popular store. That's what you have to work with. Regulators, yeah, I can kind of agree with that, but then again, it's not a problem that has anything to do with Tim Cook. Really, that's just a general reaction of the market. Like, I mean, Google is facing similar regulatory scrutiny, and yeah, again, this is. So the erosion of its design-focused culture, not that Mark Gurman will, of course, provide any proof for that, but basically what I think he refers to, and he actually does have it in this article later on, is that he believes that because Apple listens to feedback from people, for example, posting on Twitter or on Facebook and showing, oh my God, this iOS 26 beta has some readability issues. So Apple tunes down some of liquid glass effects inside iOS 26. Calling that an erosion of Apple's design-focused culture is just borderline insane. It bears absolutely no resemblance of actual reality, and that's just a niche tech Twitter opinion, but whatever. Now, the decade-long drought of breakthrough mainstream hardware is this is an absolutely meaningless complaint, because he basically refers to that Apple's last big thing, right, that was completely new in of itself, was AirPods, right? Yeah, did AirPods launched after the Apple Watch, right? So Apple Watch, AirPods, and then the next hardware thing they tried. it was a small thing with the HomePod, right? But basically, then smaller other things like AirTags, which are surprisingly popular, but obviously they're not as financially relevant as AirPods and Apple Watches. But basically, the criticism here is that Apple Vision Pro did not become a mainstream product right away. And while that's true, bringing out any mainstream new hardware products, right, is very, very, very difficult. Even many of the companies that originally brought us wireless earbuds and brought us smart watches, many of them, like even like Motorola used to do some stuff in that market, like they're not really that relevant. It basically all boiled down again to the usual suspects like Apple and Samsung, for example. So this idea that like what even is a mainstream hardware product that has come out in like the last 5 years or so that has similar like tracking to like what the Apple Watch did as a success, or AirPods, like no virtual reality headset became truly mainstream. I guess you can argue Meta Quest with a few million sales, but that's not really mainstream by Apple standards. Like, was there anything new? I mean, I guess you could argue the Nintendo Switch was like a different thing for consoles, but ultimately it's like, oh, we used to make handheld consoles. Oh, and we used to make home consoles. Oh, let's make a hybrid console. Was there actually anything like AI is software, so that isn't included. Also, AI isn't yet fully mainstream in the way that like a search engine is. So I'm really struggling. Like, to me, the biggest change in like the last 5 years in the consumer electronics space was actually Apple Silicon for Macs. It's the M1 generation of chips, and then of course the M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros with like mini LED promotion screens, and not just with of course, they are still Macs, right? But the perception of Macs changed entirely based on Apple Silicon. Reliability, snappiness, even pricing in a way, right? Because they're so much faster than anything that gets you traditionally a lot of battery life that is similarly thin and light. They're actually way cheaper than like anything that gets you like a similarly fast processor these days, especially when it launched originally. So yeah, this is just Mark Gurman being pedantic. There's like at this point you might think that Apple just hasn't put out anything like in the last decade, which yeah, it's just not true. Um, yeah, but he basically is saying that Tim Cook is doing fine inside the company, that the board of executives is very loyal to him. Um, Again, he also he takes quotes out of context. He's saying services chief Eddie Q, one of Cook's most trusted advisors, has warned internally and even publicly that Apple risks becoming the next BlackBerry or Nokia if it doesn't adapt quickly. Again, that's him saying if Apple doesn't adapt. That doesn't mean that Apple has already missed its chance to adapt. The market has not yet even shifted. We are still in a smartphone dominated market. We don't even know if, for example, if AI will push people away from smartphone like hardware. Will people transition to something like the Humane AI pin if it's being designed by Johnny Ive? I mean, it didn't make them switch when it was designed by people who work directly under Johnny Ive. So yeah, it's all messy. It's a really, really poor reporting. It's like out of context. It's the worst kind of like bad faith interpretation. Basically, yikes. He also says that, of course, the next in line is supposedly John Turnus. So um, In reality, like a lot of like internal efforts that were even assigned to Jeff Williams have been gradually transitioned to other leadership. So Jeff Williams falling away here will not fundamentally influence Apple's internal ongoings. And yes, Khan is taking over as CEO, and basically John Ternus is being groomed to replace Tim Cook down the line as well. He's roughly 49, 50 years old, so that puts him like 13, 14 years younger than Tim Cook. So definitely an opportunity for a CEO that can serve for at least the next decade of Apple's leadership. Maybe if Tim Cook stays around for another 2 years or so, while he like learns the ropes and everything, that will still give him a solid decade as leader. Of course, that's considering if the board of executives and everyone else is actually happy with the job he's gonna be doing. He is my number choice too as well, before that was even reported on. So I'm pretty happy to hear that. So basically, and the reason why I wanted to read the entire article rather than some other story that brings that summarizes it, is that Mark Gurman is basically a memer at this point. So he says Apple selects X, or Twitter, as its new user interface design team. Whether or not you like the liquid glass UI in iOS 26, macOS 26 Tahoe, and Apple's other OS, one thing is clear. It was, he says it was, which it hasn't even launched yet, but okay, a bold new look and offered a fresh take on software design. For a company that hasn't taken many design risks in recent years, again, also like the question is, where would have Apple even take, like, is Vision Pro not a design risk? Even just from the premium materials they used? Is AirPods Max not a design risk? One that was actually pretty poorly received in some ways, like for how heavy it is. Like, what is a design risk to Mark Gurman? Is it like the Nothing Phone 3, like that ugly, like multi-eyed monstrosity? I have no idea. When Apple introduced iOS 26, it showed off glass-like effects across menus, navigation bars, and backgrounds throughout the system. That dramatic, transparent style, by the way, it was not always all about full-on transparency, but okay. It was prominent in Apple's marketing materials. Again, it's not marketing, it's WWDC. That's not yet actual marketing, but I can deal with that. And clearly present in the first two beta versions. By the way, if you actually use beta 3, you will actually see how that effect sometimes fluctuates. So it's clearly a little bit buggy. Now, was it tuned down at least a little bit? Yes, especially for things like the control center. But is it gone? No. So yeah. He's saying, while performance and battery concerns may have played a role, it's hard to ignore the influence of social media feedback. Again, he's not even saying that he has internal sources that confirm this to him. And yeah, after spending 3 years developing this new design, Apple scaled it back. Apple scaled it back in one beta. It's not yet gone. They can scale it back up in the next beta. Like, that's what betas are for. It's for that kind of back and forth experimentation, finding the perfect mix between readability, usability, and an actually like flashy, pretty design. Yeah, this is very much like Mark Gurman's fan fiction here. I'm not saying Apple's first take on liquid glass was perfect. Far from it. So isn't it good now that Apple is reacting to it? But it's unsettling to see the company so quickly abandon a core visual idea. They did not abandon it. Tuning something down is not abandoning it, just definitionally. Instead of pulling back. No, oh my God, oh, I actually didn't read this. Oh, Gurman, you're such a moron. Apple should adopt a slider system so users can choose how clear and prevalent they want the liquid glass effect to be. Liquid glass is not simple transparency. It's not purely glass. It's more similar to a lens. It has a small zoom effect. It has a distortion effect. It has a chromatic chromatic aberration effect. It has so much going on that your regular window glass that you look outside your home definitely does not have, that it's not easy. You would have to put like 5 separate sliders, one for reflections that are based on liquid glass, one for refractions and chromatic aberrations, one for a small effect of zoom. Jesus Christ. Like, by the way, I find it hilarious how Mark Gurman says Apple selects X as its new user interface design team. What is funny, he then just copies a stupid talking point peddled by people on Twitter, which is like, give us a slider, that was said by the absolute biggest reactionary tech Twitter morons you can imaginable. And Mark Gurman, the guy who's now critical, who's saying, oh, it's unsettling that Apple is reacting to all of that, he just copy and pasted this idea into one of the most influential tech news outlets in the world. But he will criticize Apple for tuning down liquid glass in Control Center to make it more readable. Jesus, the lack of intellectual consistency here is astounding. This was not one of the moments, by the way, where I had to play up my emotions. I legit hadn't read this portion, right? I knew he had said, oh, Apple is reacting to Twitter, right? He said that also while being on Twitter, right? So that's where I saw it first. But him suggesting that slider, Jesus Christ. Like, he also likens things that are not the same. Like, by the way, liquid glass already gives you different options. They're called increase contrast and reduce transparency in and even reduce motion in the accessibility settings. Maybe you could give those accessibility settings a slider, I imagine. But yeah, this is just reactionary, almost like political punditry. And yeah, then he just brings up the products that are on the way. We've already reacted, of course, to a lot of that with his previous Power On newsletter. Okay, so he does not bring up, unfortunately, anything new to those products. Yeah, he also brings up that one of Apple's foundation model leads was poached by Meta or Facebook. Again, nothing new. I'm not sure if I actually reacted to that in a previous video because that news is a little bit old. But yeah, now you know if you haven't yet known. Bringing us to some other Apple news and rumors that do not come from Mark Gurman. And unfortunately, and the only reason why I bring this up is because it has also been talked about by some other leakers, but now it's being talked about more by Majin Buu, which is that we have basically been getting hints about Apple progressively evolving the dynamic island. Now, what that actually means, whether or not, for example, the dynamic island might include liquid glass UI elements, similar to, of course, the rest of iOS 26, or if it actually means a hardware change, right? Like a thinner, I believe it was called Meta Lens or something like that, thinner array of dynamic island. Of course, there's also the question, what happens once Apple actually transitions like Face ID elements and even the camera eventually under the screen? How will dynamic island work at that point if it's not connected to that cutout? Well, unfortunately, we do not get any details on any of that, but Majin Buu comes out and says, I can reveal that the dynamic island is set for significant evolution in the coming years. Apple appears committed to making it more functional and integrated, turning into a key element of the user experience. One example that I could think of is, for example, when it comes to live activities, like what we see here, is instead of just showing the most recent one, Apple could give you like a deck of cards that you swipe between, right? Similar to what some Chinese manufacturers have integrated into their essential potentially dynamic island clones. This development could mark a step forward in device interaction, but for now, I'll keep further details under wraps. So what he describes here seems to be primarily a software effort, even though, of course, we know that down the road, as Apple changes the cutout for the camera and the Face ID elements, the dynamic island will also have to evolve from a hardware perspective. But for now, I'll keep further details under wraps. Stay tuned to see how this innovation unfolds. Yeah, going to be interesting to see if somebody like Fixed Focus Digital and Digital Chat Station come out and corroborate on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if also this becomes like an iOS 26.1 surprise reveal, right? Oh, we have the iPhone 17 lineup. Like, here is what Dynamic Island can do for you now. Whether or not that could also mean we get something exclusive for the iPhone 17 series, that of course remains to be seen. And yes, Apple is now expected to unveil the iPhone 17 series during the week of September 8th, just to give you a lot more rumors in a very quick progression. There's also another piece of hardware that we had expected to launch for later this year, similar to the M5 MacBooks, but now supposedly delayed until sometime early 2026. This also comes from Bloomberg Smart Gurman. So this is the HomePad, right? The marriage of the HomePod with like a iPad mini-like screen that would have a camera. Interestingly, he says it would have they are mentioning a rechargeable built-in battery. That one is kind of new to me. I never took that one rumor very seriously because it was never corroborated by any serious leaker. But yeah, it would be based on HomeOS, would allow you to integrate with your home accessories, would allow you to take FaceTime calls. And basically, because it's so heavily built on Siri, it was designed to launch after the launch or with the launch of the new AI-based Siri that would have ability to access personal context, on-screen awareness, would be able to control apps through app intent APIs. And basically, because all of that has been pushed to sometime early next year, that is not happening. So the hub also is dependent on a new version of App Intents, which would allow Siri to more precisely control applications and functions. The device is meant to be operated primarily via voice, something Apple Intents enables. At this point, I have little to no expectation that the product will arrive this year. Instead, I expect it in 2026, around the same time that the new Siri finally launches. That to me makes perfect sense. I actually predicted that the HomePad would be delayed once Siri was delayed. So there is obviously nothing shocking here. Some other small Apple news. Apple is gaining some traction in the streaming world. Severance made it into the top 5 of watch shows of last year, and Apple's overall market share has of like watch time has increased. So slow and steady wins the race. I think Apple has a really good future in the streaming wars, if you want to classify them as that. But yeah, to me, Severance has been one of my favorite shows in recent memories. Out of all of these shows, the only one I like even is You. So outside of Severance, of course. So yeah, I'm really rooting for Apple. It's not just Severance, it's Foundation. It's man, I'm really terrible with names. It's The Morning Show. It's even C in the beginning. And there are like so much great sci-fi stuff on there, thriller stuff, crime series. Apple even creates like podcasts around that. So yeah, Apple TV Plus, great streaming service, in my opinion, currently offering the highest quality out of all of them. Obviously, it doesn't quite have the content catalog that Netflix or Prime Video or Disney Plus might offer you, but it still has its place, in my opinion. Now, let's actually talk about something that I know is very important in the broader Apple ecosystem, and that's the iPhone. Well, supposedly, we now kind of know the colors of the iPhone 17. This is coming from pretty reliable guy, Sony Dixon. He shows off dummy models, which that usually means that they're actually based on something. So this is something worth covering. And in fact, he does even offer us color for vanilla, Air, and Pro models here. iPhone 17 will feature the largest pool of color options, including black, gray, silver, light blue, green, and purple. So you can see that for the base iPhone 17. The way he basically analyzes the colors is by looking at the color matched camera rings. So that's something that, for example, would not work with leaked components for Samsung phones, because Samsung does not bother with details like color matched rings around the cameras. So black and gray, silver, which probably just corresponds with a pretty white looking product, light blue, light green, light purple. We have heard now for a few rumors that the iPhone 17 will not have the kind of vibrant colors that we got on the iPhone 16. I'm not sure what that is based on internally at Apple, because those colors of the iPhone 16 have been much, much more positively received than the colors of the iPhone 15 series. So I wonder if Apple wants to stop some cannibalizing of the Pro models by the base models by making their colors a little bit less attractive, to say the least, right? But at least it's a solid lineup of colors, as long as the colors are actually pretty solid. For the iPhone 17 Air, we get a very Pro-like lineup with black, silver, blue, gray, which is interesting, and light gold. We had seen rumors that some form of gold could be coming to the Air and Pros this year in some fashion, maybe in like a copper-like finish. Seems like this one is more light gold, so more vibrant, and the blue-gray compromise is very interesting to me, and I will be especially interested to see what Apple ultimately calls this color, because gray for Apple is usually space gray, black is just black. Sometimes there's like space black, silver or white, obviously silver for the metal and white for the actual glass. But yeah, blue gray sounds definitely interesting here. We had heard rumors about like a sky blue like finish coming to the iPhone 17 series, probably the Pros. So that's the color that we got on the M4 MacBook Air. Maybe that's a little bit of that, but on the Air rather than the Pro. But then again, obviously, we are speculating based on camera ring colors rather than the actual chassis. Next is for the Pro and Pro Max. So we get black, we get gray, which I kind of always think is kind of overkill to have both, but that probably suggests that both sell reasonably well. Of course, silver makes sense. And then we get a new dark blue. So that's interesting that it supposedly not lines up with like the sky blue rumor, which is a very light blue. But then again, the blue of the camera rings does not have to 100% correspond to the color intensity of the glass and the chassis. And next is an orange color. So, but supposedly that orange shade will reportedly be used for a dark gold or a copper colored iPhone 17 Pro, Pro Max. This is like the second or third year in a row that we're getting rumors about like a copper colored iPhone. Hasn't yet happened. Gonna be interesting if it happens here. Might be that he calls it orange because simply in this light they look orange. Maybe in the real world they will actually be far more similar to the dark gold or copper color that is then actually gonna come to the chassis and the glass on the back. And last but not least is we got the release of the Galaxy. We got the Galaxy Fold 7 and the Galaxy Flip 7, I, of course, was not able to react live to the Galaxy Unpacked event. I will be reacting with you guys once full-on reviews by some bigger reviewers come out. I mean, I can actually check it right now. Z Fold. Not that I even have the time today. Yeah, basically, it's like people are posting like some even like multi-day impressions of it, but like actual big reviews I think will be coming I probably like tomorrow or on Wednesday. So if I stream again on Thursday, that will give me the opportunity to react to all my usual favorite reviewers in that regard, like Super Steph's camera reviews, MKBHD, Mr. Who's the Boss, and we can analyze it all together, right? So that's a little bit of an outlook for you guys on future MarkTech content. But here, actually, we do have something else to talk about, which is the chip that's powering the Galaxy Z Flip 7. So it's not a chip coming to the Fold 7. That one is getting... Sorry, guys, bless me. That one is basically universally getting the Snapdragon 8 Elite all over the world, but the Flip 7, even in countries like the United States, is actually getting Samsung's own in-house processor based on their own first GAFET node, and that is the Exynos 2500. So you see here some CPU benchmarks from all the rest. So you see that from the Z Flip 7, it's not really a multi-core competitor to either the A18 Pro chip on the iPhone 16 Pro series or to the extreme multi-core performance, one would argue, by the 8 Elite, especially the 8 Elite for Galaxy. But you see that it handily destroys the Google Pixel 9 Pro with its Jesus Christ, like last gen hardware performance, at least by Apple standards. You see that with single core performance, the 18 Pro is of course still king, with the 8 Elite and the Dimensity 9400 being a little bit behind, but not by as much as they used to. And then the Z Flip 7 is a little bit behind those. So it's like a 2-gen gap to at least to the 18 Pro, and then a small half-gen gap to the 8 Elite and the Dimensity 9400. I should say that just from my personal perspective, I'm absolutely fine with like roughly 7,800 or so multi-core. That's faster than the multi-core performance on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. On a chip that's probably even a little bit more efficient. I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't think we need 10,000, 12,000. I think it's okay to get those numbers, but knowing what power consumption is associated once you push the P cores and the E cores all simultaneously, it's not really happening during like media watching or during gaming, where a lot of the chip's power is of course taken up by the GPU rather than the CPU. Now for the single core, I have to say I pretty much have no limit on the single core performance because it's the main thing that corresponds with like system snappiness. So the fact that this chip is like roughly 2300-ish, in this test, it's actually a little bit lower, but I've seen some higher. Is a little bit disappointing. I think that obviously that puts it even below, like again, my iPhone 17 Pro Max with 2900. That actually puts it even below Apple's A16 chip. Now, of course, the Z Flip 7 will have some other benefits like faster storage, faster memory versus devices featuring the A16, but it's still a little bit underwhelming that Samsung's first-gen GAFET smartphone chip does not even reach the first generation 3-nanometer TSMC chip, right? So yeah, you can see it how you want. I'm not super disappointed by this chip. Don't forget, this chip was actually supposed to come out in early 2025, but it was delayed due to poor yields of Samsung's 3 nanometer GAAFET node. Exynos 2600 is supposedly taking a pretty big leap, so we are going to have to evaluate Apple's A19 Pro, TSMC's 8 Elite 2, MediaTek's Dimensity 90, 500, and all of them at that point versus the Exynos 2600. And yes, you can see that the Tensor G4 and the Pixel 9 Pro doesn't even reach a full 2000 points in single core performance. So this is just existing on a completely other level. They also have Exynos graphics. I do refrain from having any kind of opinions based on, first of all, Wildlife Extreme is useless in my opinion completely. Solar Bay is a ray tracing test that I still have yet to see how it corresponds with actual games that support real ray tracing. Seems to be ahead of the iPhone here, but then again, we would actually need to see what does it mean for sustained performance, what does it mean for real world performance in games. Do games even do a good job of supporting AMD based graphics? This is based on RDNA 3.5 roughly. Unfortunately, even though of course we already have RDNA 4, yeah, and with great tech like FSR4, that's seemingly not yet anywhere outside of the desktop chips, the desktop GPUs by AMD, and partially some of those architectural goodness is in the PS5 Pro. Yeah, so I will watch, of course, Geekervan reviews for it and all that stuff, but for now, it just looks like a slightly unimpressive high mid-range chip to lower high-end chip, if you want to put it that way. It has shown to be pretty efficient though, so hopefully with a larger battery on the Z Flip 7 than on the previous generation, it will not actually represent any kind of battery downgrade. And the last chip, and with it also the last piece of news I would like to talk about today, is actually the Tensor G5. So of course I've done plenty of shitting on this channel on the Tensor G2, the G3, the G4, but the Tensor G5 is Google's first use of TSMC's 3 nanometer node. It's using N3E. That's in a year where Apple, for example, is transitioning to N3P, but that's roughly only a 5% different in actual node capabilities. The actual reason why the chip looks extremely unimpressive is because Google just apparently is not good at making it. First of all, that main 3.8 gigahertz clock chip, that's an X4 X4 core from ARM. So obviously, after X4, you would think, oh, X5. No, it's actually the X925 that we ended up getting in the Dimensity 9400, for example. Jesus, the ads, like, can I... Oh, Jesus, so stupid. But so we are basically using a last gen, for now, it's a last gen main core, while we are actually supposed to get like the X935 soon, or X1025, however they end up calling it. And we're getting a second generation of Snapdragon 8 Elite based P cores. So this is very far behind. Now the E-cores are a little bit more modern with like the use of A725s and whatever, and unfortunately A520s. So this chip is just weird to me. Of course, first it means it's still ARM v8, not ARM v9. That, of course, means it doesn't have all the new accelerators that, for example, Apple has been using on A18 and M4, and that Qualcomm is most likely utilizing in the 8 Elite 2, and that ARM is utilizing in the with the successor. Well, they already have some of it in the X925, but now it's even more so, and that's going to be used by MediaTek and the Dimensity 9500. So basically, you are getting performance that's in every way inferior to Apple's A17 Pro chip. In fact, we're actually looking at performance very similar to Apple's A16. Now, I strongly believe that it will at least give you better GPU performance at this point, just from better cooling alone. But you see, when we look at single core performance for the A16, that's 2500. That's a solid 10% faster than the single core performance that we saw. In fact, we would have to move slightly under the performance of the A15 and more look at it as like an A14 kind of chip, like basically right between the A14 and the A15. That's really, really disappointing. Don't forget, the A14 was launched in the second half of 2020, and it was a 5 nanometer based processor. Now, when we look at multi-core, right, that's where it brings up to roughly slightly under A16, slightly over A15. Again, that's not quite as disappointing as the single core performance, but again, these are N5P and N4 based chips, so that's going to make it obviously pretty disappointing that on a N3E, which is the same node as is used by this chip, it's not even reaching those numbers. What can I say? Google keeps on disappointing. So we've heard rumors that supposedly next year they're actually jumping head on into 2 nanometers from TSMC. So after being 3 nodes behind or something like that to being like half a node behind, supposedly next year we might see iPhones and Google chips use the same high-end 2 nanometer node. I'm not sure about the Snapdragon 8 Elite 3. The rumors there have been a little bit questionable. But hopefully by 2026, Google can get their shit together. I told you guys how I don't care about absolute multi-core performance. And I think that with good optimization, you can make 6000 perform really well, especially if you pair it with fast storage like the latest UFS 4.1, maybe even like the Pro version, right? If you pair it with the fastest memory, if you, of course, keep on a lot of great stuff like high-end accelerators, great media engines. But my God, just from a raw numbers perspective, this is extremely disappointing. I expected 7,000. I did not expect Google to even get to 8,000, which Apple right now offers you like 8,600 or something like that. I did not expect 3,600, which what Apple is offering again right now, and probably is going to offer you close to 4,000. I expected roughly like basically, I expected the A17 Pro chip, right? 2 years later, I expected 2800 to 2900 single core, and I expected 7000 multi-core. But seemingly, I will have to wait another year for that. But who knows? Maybe they will leapfrog it, and then by next year, they will actually have an A18 Pro competitor at the time when the A20 comes out. Yeah, but that's about it for today, guys. We've talked about a lot of different topics all at once. Let me see if there are any... what's up? Let me see if there's anything that I've missed. Sky blue color, now rumored for iPhone 17 Air instead of 17 Pro. Yep, that makes sense. That's roughly what we reacted to with the camera model leak. iPhone 17 Pro models would get that... gold, titanium, even more titanium deserty, copper color, and blue, of course. We already reacted to those colors, thankfully. And then let's see if there's anything on 9 to 5 Mac that we might have missed. No, they're all talking about the colors. Actually, a good reason for me to keep checking out other websites other than, of course, all the typical Apple websites, because they will from time to time have Apple leaks and rumors before a designated Apple website will have those by itself. Yeah, but that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining in or finding the video afterwards. Before you go, the last shout out for you to do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here: subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, becoming a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Jonathan, and Benveni, who are MarkTech Pro Max supporters either here on YouTube or on Patreon. So you can also go check out our Patreon. And of course, just commenting, just liking the videos, all of this helps. Let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. I'll see you then. This is MarkTech tuning out.